Caleb Ward had been riding since late afternoon, and now the sun was gone behind the distant red cliffs. Only the pale moon lit the wide desert around him. His horse moved slowly, tired from the long day. Caleb did not mind the silence. In fact, he liked it. He liked hearing only the wind brushing the dry grass and the sound of his boots tapping lightly against the saddle. For years, this desert had been the only place where he felt calm. He was a quiet cowboy, the kind who never said more than he needed to. People in town often tried to make conversation with him, but he always found a way to keep his answers short. He helped neighbors fix fences, he helped with lost cattle, he did odd jobs, but he never stayed to talk. He wasn't rude, just alone. It had become his safe way of living. Tonight, as he rode back toward his small cabin several miles away, he felt something different in the air. The desert usually felt open, empty, predictable. But tonight, something felt alive, watchful. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe he was only tired. Maybe he just wanted to go home and sleep. But after a few minutes, he noticed a figure standing near a rocky ridge. At first, he thought it was just a shadow. The desert played tricks at night. But as his horse got closer, the shadow became more clear. Someone was really standing there. Caleb pulled the reins gently, slowing down. He squinted, trying to understand who would be out here alone at this hour. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't call out. It just stood still, tall and calm, as if waiting for something. Caleb's heart beat a little faster. He wasn't a man who scared easily, but he also didn't like surprises on quiet nights. He debated turning around, pretending he saw nothing. But then he told himself that would be wrong. A person alone in the desert at night could be in danger. It got cold. Animals roamed. People could get lost or injured. So he took a slow breath and nudged his horse forward again. As he approached, he realized it was a woman. A tall woman wrapped in a blanket. The moonlight fell across her face, showing strong features, dark eyes, and long hair braided over her shoulder. She wasn't frightened. She didn't step back or raise her hands. She simply watched him approach, calm as still water. Caleb cleared his throat. "Evening," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She tilted her head slightly. "You ride alone," she said in a low, steady voice. "Always alone." Her words made him freeze. She spoke as if she knew him, as if she had seen him many times before. But he had never seen her in his life. He blinked, confused. "Ma'am," he murmured, "do I know you?" The woman stepped closer, not afraid of the horse or the cowboy sitting on it. Her eyes were serious, deep, almost studying him. "My name is Nayeli," she said. "I am from the Apache village not far from here." Caleb nodded slowly. He had heard about that village but had never visited it. He respected its people, and they usually kept to themselves. But he still didn't understand how she knew he rode alone. Nayeli looked past him, scanning the dark horizon. "My younger brother has not returned home. He left before sunset. He should have come back by now." Her voice stayed calm, but Caleb could hear the worry beneath it. He might be lost, or hurt. Caleb felt something shift inside him. He didn't know this woman, but something about her voice, the steady tone mixed with hidden fear, pulled at him. He dismounted without thinking. His boots touched the sand with a soft thud. "You're out here looking for him alone?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, I could not wait." Caleb hesitated. This was not his business. He lived simple. He stayed away from other people's problems. But he looked at Nayeli's face again, and the moonlight showed the exhaustion in her eyes. He knew she had been walking for hours. He knew she would keep walking even if she was freezing or tired. He sighed softly. "I can help you search," he said. Something in Nayeli's expression softened. Not a smile, but a quiet understanding. "Thank you," she said. Before they started walking, She stepped close to him, very close. She looked up at him with a curious expression, almost studying the way his breath changed when she came near. Her voice dropped low, almost like a whisper slipping through the warm night air. "Cowboy," she said slowly, "are you afraid of me? Or drawn to me?" Her words hit him like a sudden wind. Caleb felt his chest tighten. His heartbeat jumped. He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. He wasn't afraid, not in the normal way. But he also didn't understand the sudden warmth spreading through him. He had never felt something like that from just standing near someone. He took a half step back, and Nayeli's eyes followed the movement with a gentle curiosity, as if she already understood his confusion. "We should look for your brother," Caleb managed to say. Nayeli nodded. "Yes." They began walking along the rocky ridge. Caleb held his horse's reins, and Nayeli walked beside him with quiet, steady steps. The desert stretched far ahead, but she seemed to read the land with ease. She pointed out small things he would have missed: footprints, broken twigs, the direction of faint tracks leading into a narrow path between cliffs. Caleb watched her silently. She moved with confidence, her blanket flowing behind her like part of the night itself. Her braid swung gently across her back. Every now and then she glanced at him, not nervously, but as if checking whether he was still there. He felt something strange each time their eyes met, like the desert air became warmer for a moment. After walking for almost an hour, they reached a high rock formation. Nayeli knelt beside a patch of sand. "He came through here," she whispered. "These are his footprints." Caleb crouched beside her. The prints were small, definitely a young boy's. They followed them quietly, careful not to disturb the sand. The night grew colder, and Caleb noticed Nayeli shiver slightly. Without thinking, he removed his coat and placed it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, surprised. "You will be cold," she said softly. "I'm fine," he replied, though he wasn't completely sure. Nayeli touched the coat lightly, as if feeling the warmth it still carried. "You are kind," she murmured. Caleb felt his ears grow warm. He wasn't used to anyone seeing him that way. Most people thought he preferred being alone because he didn't care, but Nayeli seemed to look past that. They walked deeper into the rocky area. The wind picked up, brushing against them with cold fingers. Caleb stayed alert, listening for any sound. A few times, Nayeli stopped to examine the ground again, whispering short prayers under her breath. At one point, Caleb noticed her hands trembling slightly. He stepped closer. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Just worried?" Caleb wanted to say something comforting, but words never came easy for him. Instead, he simply stood beside her for a moment, letting her breathe. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. When she opened them again, her gaze lingered on Caleb a moment longer than before. "You have a quiet heart," she said softly. "But it is a strong one." Her words confused him again. How could she read him so well when they had barely met? He didn't know. But strangely, he didn't want her to stop reading him. They followed the tracks until the path opened into a wide, flat area of soft sand. The moon was bright overhead, painting the desert silver. Caleb scanned the ground and spotted something a few yards away. "A footprint," he said quickly. Nayeli hurried toward it and knelt down. She touched the sand gently. "Yes," she whispered. "He was here." Caleb saw hope spark in her eyes. For the first time that night, her shoulders seemed lighter. She stood slowly and looked out across the open desert. "We will find him," Caleb said. Nayeli turned toward him. The moonlight reflected in her eyes, making them shine softly. She stepped a little closer, the coat he gave her wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She seemed smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, like someone carrying a heavy weight who suddenly trusted him enough to share a piece of it. You came when I stood alone, she whispered. For that, I am not alone anymore. Caleb felt something warm spread through his chest. Maybe it was the feeling he had been missing for years. Connection. Someone looking at him not as a silent cowboy, but as a person worth trusting. The desert night stretched quiet before them, but it no longer felt empty. With each step they took, something unseen was forming between them. Something gentle, unexpected, and strong. Caleb didn't know what the rest of the night would bring. He only knew he wanted to keep walking beside her. He wanted to help her find her brother. He wanted to understand why her presence made his heart beat in a way he couldn't explain. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered if he would ever be able to answer her whisper from earlier. Cowboy, are you afraid of me or drawn to me? Because with every minute that passed, the answer inside him was growing clearer. He wasn't afraid. He was drawn. Caleb and Nayeli continued walking deeper into the desert, following the small footprints left behind by her younger brother. The night had grown colder, and even the wind felt sharper now. Still, Nayeli walked forward with strong steps, and Caleb admired the focus in her eyes. She was worried, he could see that clearly, but she didn't let fear control her. She kept her mind clear, her heart steady, and her eyes fixed on the trail. Caleb led his horse beside them. Every few minutes, the horse lifted its head, sniffing the wind as if it sensed something ahead. Caleb gently patted its neck to calm it. Easy, he said softly. We're almost there. Nayeli looked over her shoulder. Your horse is loyal, she said. It listens to you. You have a calm way with animals. Caleb shrugged lightly. Animals are easier than people, he replied. Nayeli gave him a small, gentle smile, only because animals do not expect you to speak. Her words made Caleb fall quiet. She wasn't mocking him. She understood something about him that most people didn't. He wasn't quiet because he disliked others. He was quiet because he didn't know how to open up. He didn't know how to let people close. But tonight, without realizing it, he had opened a piece of his heart already. And somehow, Nayeli had seen it. They reached a narrow path between tall rock walls. The footprints continued through the passage. Caleb stopped and studied the ground. The sand was disturbed, as if the boy had slipped or stumbled. Caleb pointed at the sharp slope near the rocks. He fell here, he said quietly. Look. Nayeli knelt beside the disturbed sand and touched it with her fingers, her face tightening with worry. He might be hurt, she whispered. Caleb felt a heavy pull in his chest. He did not know the boy, but he could see how much Nayeli cared for him. Her voice shook slightly, and he sensed how frightened she really was. He crouched beside her. We'll find him, he said in a steady voice. I'm not leaving until we do. Nayeli looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. You don't even know us, she said softly. Why are you helping this much? Caleb hesitated for a long moment. He looked away, staring at the dark rocks around them. Then he finally answered. Because you're out here alone, because you're trying to protect someone you love, and because... He swallowed gently. Because I want to. Her breath hitched softly, not from surprise, but from a silent gratitude she didn't know how to put into words. She nodded once, and they continued forward. The narrow path opened into a wider canyon. The moon shone down brightly, revealing more signs. The boy's footprints became uneven, almost dragging. Nayeli touched the prints again and whispered his name under her breath. Caleb could see she was trying to stay strong, but her shoulders trembled slightly. He walked a little closer, ready to steady her if she needed it. Your brother is brave, Caleb said quietly. These tracks mean he kept walking even if he was scared or hurt. Nayeli sighed, letting her eyes rest on the ground. He is young, she murmured. Sometimes he acts without thinking. He believes he is strong like the older warriors. She paused. but he is still my little brother." Caleb nodded. "We'll bring him home." As they walked deeper into the canyon, they found charred wood, what looked like a tiny fire that someone had started and left behind. Nayeli crouched near it, her hand hovering above the ashes. "He tried to stay warm," she whispered. "Or someone helped him." Caleb studied the ground carefully. There were more footprints now, larger ones. A stranger had been here. But there were no signs of struggle or danger. The small fire suggested the stranger might have tried to help. "He wasn't taken," Caleb said softly. "Someone just found him before we did." Nayeli breathed out in relief. "Then he is safe. At least for now," Caleb added gently. They walked again, following the two sets of footprints. The stranger's trail led them toward a shallow hill. As they climbed it, the wind grew stronger, blowing Nayeli's blanket around her. She held it tightly, but she shivered again. Caleb noticed immediately. Without hesitating, he stepped beside her, shielding her from the cold wind with his body. Nayeli stopped walking for a moment and glanced up at him. She didn't say anything, but her eyes softened with a quiet understanding. She accepted his silent gesture, which somehow spoke more loudly than any words he could have offered. They crossed the hill and descended into a flat area with dried shrubs scattered across the ground. In the distance, something caught Caleb's eye, a small shape leaning against an old tree. "There," Caleb said suddenly. "Someone's resting there." Nayeli's heart jumped, and she hurried forward. Caleb walked fast beside her, holding his reins as his horse followed close behind. As they got closer, the shape grew clearer. A young boy curled up beside a half-burned stick, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't his. The old blanket looked like a traveler's, faded but warm. Nayeli gasped. "My brother!" She rushed to him and knelt beside the boy. He stirred weakly, his eyes opening halfway. "Sister," he whispered. Nayeli hugged him carefully, checking him for injuries. He looked exhausted and slightly bruised from the fall, but he was alive, breathing, and safe. Caleb stood nearby, giving them space. A moment later, he knelt down too. "Easy," he said softly. "You're safe now." The boy looked at Caleb with sleepy eyes, unsure who he was, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he rested his head against Nayeli again. "He is tired," Nayeli murmured, "but he will be fine." Caleb nodded. Someone must have helped him, maybe someone passing through. She looked around but saw no one. The desert was empty except for them. "Whoever it was," she whispered, "I am grateful." Caleb gently lifted the boy in his arms. The child was light, too light for his age, as if he had walked hungry and tired for a long time. Nayeli adjusted the blanket around him. "We should get him back home," Caleb said. Nayeli agreed and walked beside Caleb as he carried the boy. Her steps were softer now, lighter, her fear replaced by relief. The desert no longer felt threatening. It felt calmer, almost peaceful. After walking for a while, they reached a flatter area where Caleb stopped. He gently placed the boy on his horse, securing him carefully so he would not fall. Nayeli stood close, watching everything with grateful eyes. "You carry him," Caleb said to her. "It'll make him feel safe." Nayeli climbed onto the horse behind her brother and held him gently. Caleb walked beside them, holding the reins. For the first time since they met, Caleb saw Nayeli truly breathe normally. Her shoulders relaxed, her eyes softened, and her voice became warmer. "You kept your word," she said. "You said you would not leave until we found him." Caleb shrugged lightly, his face turning slightly pink. "A promise is a promise." Nayeli watched him for a few quiet seconds. "You're different from other cowboys," she whispered. "You carry yourself like someone trying to hide a good heart." Caleb looked away shyly. "I'm not hide," she cut him off gently. "You are, but it does not work with me." Her voice became softer. I see you. Caleb didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever made him feel understood. They walked in silence for a long time. But it was a warm silence, a good silence, the kind that made both of them feel safe. When the wind softened and the desert night grew quiet again, Nayeli leaned toward Caleb slightly, speaking in a low whisper that made his breath catch. You walk beside me like a friend I have known for years, she said. I am not used to trusting someone so quickly. Caleb swallowed. I'm not used to someone trusting me. She tilted her head. Maybe the desert brought us together for a reason. Caleb didn't answer, but deep inside he felt something shift, something warm, something he didn't know he had been waiting for. Nayeli studied his face carefully, then spoke in a whisper so soft it blended with the wind. And Cowboy, you still haven't answered my question from earlier. Caleb froze. She looked into his eyes, her voice gentle yet direct. Are you afraid of me? Or drawn to me? Caleb opened his mouth, but no words came. Not yet. But the answer inside him was growing stronger with every step they took together across the quiet desert night. Caleb walked beside the horse, steadying the reins as Nayeli held her tired younger brother close. The desert night felt softer now, as if the land itself had calmed down after their long search. The moon hung high above them, glowing quietly over the sand and rocks. The worst was over. They had found the boy, and he was safe. But something else had started between Caleb and Nayeli, something neither of them could ignore. The walk back was long. The boy rested against Nayeli's chest, breathing softly. Every few minutes, she checked his forehead or brushed hair away from his face. Her care for him was so gentle, so full of love, that Caleb felt it settle deep inside him. He admired her strength, but this quiet tenderness was something different. It made him see her in a new light. Someone brave, yes, but also someone with a heart bigger than the desert itself. Caleb kept his eyes on the ground most of the time, careful with every step, but he could feel Nayeli's eyes on him from time to time. She watched him quietly, as if she was trying to understand him more deeply than before. After a long moment, she spoke. You did not have to search all night, she said. Most men would have stopped or turned back. Caleb shrugged gently. I couldn't leave you alone like that. Nayeli's voice softened. Why? You do not even know me. Caleb walked silently for a few seconds, then answered in a low voice. You didn't feel like a stranger? Nayeli turned her head slightly, surprised by his honesty. Caleb rarely said personal things. His words were usually short, safe, practical. But tonight, something inside him had opened a little. The wind brushed the sand around their feet. The desert was silent except for their footsteps and the sound of the horses' hooves. They reached a wide-open stretch and Caleb slowed down. We should rest here for a while, he said. Your brother needs it. Nayeli nodded. Caleb helped her climb down from the horse while holding the boy carefully. Once she was steady on the ground, she adjusted the blanket around him and sat beside a large flat stone. Caleb gathered a few dry sticks and lit a small fire. Not bright, not large, just enough to keep them warm. The firelight lit Nayeli's face softly, making her eyes glow with a deep, warm color. Caleb sat across from her, close enough to offer comfort, but far enough not to intrude. The silence between them was not awkward. It was peaceful. After a long moment, Nayeli spoke again. You have a gentle way, she murmured. Quiet, but strong. Caleb's face warmed. I just tried to do what's right. She looked at him for a long time as if thinking deeply. You remind me of the calm before a storm, she said softly. Still, steady, but full of something powerful inside. Caleb shifted slightly, unsure how to respond. No one had ever described him like that. He had always been the quiet one. The man people forgot was standing in the room. But Nayeli saw more. She always seemed to see more. He poked the fire gently with a stick. "I don't know about powerful," he muttered. Nayeli smiled gently. "You do not see yourself clearly." Her brother stirred in her arms, making her pause. She comforted him, brushing his forehead. Once he settled again, she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "You walk with a heavy heart," she said, "but you carry it alone because you believe no one wants to help you." Caleb's breath caught. How could she know that? He hadn't said anything about his past, about the people he'd lost, about the loneliness he carried like an old wound. He hadn't told her a single story, but she saw it. She saw him. Caleb looked down at his hands. "It's easier to be alone," he whispered. Nayeli shook her head slowly, her braid falling gently over her shoulder. "No, it is only quieter. And quiet can feel safe, but it can also feel empty." Caleb swallowed. The words felt too close, too true. She leaned back slightly, warming her hands near the fire. "You are not empty," she added softly. "You only closed the door of your heart for too long." Caleb didn't know what to say. He felt exposed, as if she had taken a part of him he never let anyone see, and held it carefully in her hands. A few minutes passed in silence. The fire crackled softly. The boy slept peacefully. Finally, Nayeli looked up again. "I never asked your full name," she said gently. "Caleb Ward," he replied. She repeated it softly. "Caleb." The way she said his name made something warm rise in his chest. "It suits you," she added. "It sounds strong." Caleb smiled shyly, the expression small but sincere. "Tell me something," she said quietly. He lifted his eyes. "What's that?" "Why do you ride alone every night?" Caleb took a deep breath. His answer remained stuck in his throat for a few seconds. He rarely talked about himself, but something about Nayeli made him feel safe. "My family is gone," he finally said. "Ever since then, I stayed to myself. People tried to help, but I didn't want them to. I thought if I stayed quiet, I wouldn't lose anyone again." Nayeli's eyes softened with understanding. "Pain can make us hide," she said. "But hiding does not heal anything." Caleb nodded slowly. He knew she was right. "You are not meant to be alone forever," she whispered. "No one is." Her words washed over him gently. He felt something open inside him, a small, fragile hope he didn't know he still carried. The wind blew softly across the desert. Nayeli pulled the blanket more tightly around her brother and shifted closer to the fire. Caleb noticed her shivering. "Here," he said quietly. "Take this." He removed another layer of clothing, a thick scarf he kept tied around his waist for cold nights. He handed it to her. Nayeli looked surprised again, as she always did when he showed kindness without hesitation. "You'll be cold," she said. "I'm fine," he replied softly. "You need it more." She accepted it slowly, and when her fingers brushed his hand, he felt a warm jolt in his chest. She noticed his reaction and held his gaze steadily. "Caleb," she whispered. His heart stopped for a moment. "You are not afraid of the night," she said softly. "You are not afraid of danger, but when I stand close—" She paused for a breath. "You forget how to breathe." Caleb blinked, caught completely off guard. His chest tightened again, not from fear, but from the strange feeling he still didn't fully understand. She rested her hand lightly against the scarf he had given her. "It is not fear," she murmured. "I think you are drawn to something you cannot explain yet." Caleb felt heat rise to his face. He wanted to look away, but his eyes stayed on hers. She was too honest, too calm, too real. She wasn't forcing anything. She wasn't pushing him. She was simply telling him what she saw. And what she saw was him. Before he could answer, her brother stirred again. Nayeli shifted to comfort him. Caleb took a slow breath, grateful for a moment to gather himself. His heart was beating too fast. But then Nayeli looked at him again, an unreadable emotion in her eyes. "Caleb," she whispered once more, "you still haven't answered the question I asked you." Caleb felt his chest tighten. She leaned closer, her voice almost carried away by the desert wind. "Are you afraid of me, or drawn to me?" Caleb swallowed hard, unable to look away from her. He opened his mouth, but still, no words came. Something inside him trembled. Something inside him wanted to speak, but the words felt too big, too real. Nayeli watched him quietly, patiently. She did not push him for an answer. She just let her question hang in the cool night air, waiting for the moment he was ready. The fire burned softly between them. The desert was still. The boy slept peacefully. Caleb's heart beat fast, faster than it had in years. The truth was growing inside him like the dawn rising behind the mountains. He wasn't afraid. He was drawn. More than he had ever been drawn to anyone. But the words would come later. For now, the night held their secret. The sky had begun to lighten by the time Caleb, Nayeli, and her younger brother reached the distant edge of her village. A soft, pale glow stretched across the horizon, slowly pushing away the darkness of the night. Birds were waking up, their faint calls echoing through the cool morning air. The desert, so cold and silent hours before, now seemed gentle and alive again. Nayeli held her brother carefully on the horse, while Caleb walked beside them, steady as ever. He kept glancing up at the horizon, making sure they were heading in the right direction. His boots left deep marks in the soft sand, but his steps were firm and calm. Nayeli looked down at her brother's resting face. "He will recover," she said softly. "He just needs warmth and food." Caleb nodded. "He's strong." He held on. She looked at Caleb again, her eyes soft with gratitude he didn't know how to handle. "He held on because you found him in time." Caleb looked away shyly. "We found him," he corrected quietly. "Together." Nayeli smiled. It was small, gentle, but full of emotion. She knew he didn't like being praised. He wasn't used to someone thanking him or seeing the good he carried inside, but she still wanted him to know how much his help meant. When they reached a ridge overlooking the village, Caleb stopped. He watched as thin lines of smoke rose from morning fires below. People moved around quietly, preparing for the new day. The village felt peaceful, warm, safe. "You're home," Caleb said softly. Nayeli nodded and looked down at the houses built from earth and wood. She held her sleeping brother tightly, relief filling her chest. But as she looked at her home, her eyes darkened with another feeling, something she didn't say out loud. Caleb stepped closer to the horse. "Let me carry him the rest of the way," he offered. Nayeli hesitated, then carefully handed her brother into Caleb's arms. Caleb held the boy gently as if he were something precious. He adjusted the blanket around him and made sure the child's head rested comfortably on his shoulder. "You're good with children," Nayeli said softly as she walked beside him. Caleb smiled faintly. "Maybe because they don't ask too many questions." Nayeli laughed quietly, a warm breath in the cool morning air. "You don't like questions?" Caleb looked at her for a moment. "Only the ones that leave me speechless." Nayeli's steps slowed as she heard those words. She knew exactly which question he meant, the question he had not answered yet. They continued walking down the ridge toward the village. As they approached the first set of homes, a group of elders spotted them. Their expressions changed instantly. Worry became relief. Fear became joy. Nayeli! One of the women called, hurrying toward them. Your brother! He is safe! Another elder placed her hand over her heart. Thank the spirits! Nayeli bowed her head respectfully. He is tired, but he will recover. All eyes turned toward Caleb holding the boy. The villagers studied him with curiosity and caution. A few murmured quietly, wondering who the quiet cowboy was. Nayeli stepped closer to Caleb, standing proudly beside him. He helped us, she told her people. He searched all night. He did not stop until we found my brother. The elders looked at Caleb again, this time with admiration and respect. One nodded deeply. You have done a good thing, he said. Caleb dipped his head slightly, uncomfortable with attention. Just did what was needed, he muttered. Nayeli gently touched her brother's back. Let us take him to the healer. Caleb followed them into the village, carrying the child carefully. As they entered the healer's home, a warm smell of herbs filled the air. The healer, a calm, elderly woman, welcomed them inside and pointed toward a soft bed covered with woven blankets. Lay him down, she instructed gently. Caleb did. He made sure the boy was comfortable before stepping back. Nayeli stood close to him, watching her brother's breathing. The healer checked his injuries and nodded. He will be well, she said. A few days of rest, good food, warm blankets. He will be himself again. Nayeli let out a breath she had been holding for hours. Thank you, she whispered. The healer smiled and looked at Caleb. And thank you, cowboy. The desert can be unkind, but it seems it brought you here at the right time. Caleb looked down, his heart warming despite himself. I'm glad he's safe, he said. Nayeli touched his arm lightly. Come outside with me, she said softly. I want to speak with you. Caleb followed her out of the healer's home. They walked to a quiet corner of the village where the morning sun began coloring the sky pink and gold. Children ran in the distance, people cooked breakfast over small fires, and the desert breeze carried the scent of warm earth. They stopped beneath a tall tree. Caleb stood quietly, unsure what she wanted to say. He shifted his weight, his hands tucked into the sides of his coat. Nayeli turned to face him fully. Her eyes were deep, warm, and serious. Caleb, she said softly, you helped me without asking for anything. You showed kindness even when you didn't have to. He shook his head. You were in trouble. Anyone would have... No, she interrupted gently. Not anyone. Not everyone walks through the cold night for someone they don't know. Not everyone stays until the end. Caleb swallowed. He didn't know how to respond. Nayeli took a slow breath. Last night I asked you a question. Twice. She stepped a little closer. And you still haven't answered it. Caleb felt his heartbeat pick up. He stared at the sand for a moment, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. The morning sun touched her face, giving her a soft glow. Her braid hung over her shoulder, the last bits of moonlight still tangled in it. She stepped closer, close enough that Caleb felt the warmth of her presence. Her voice dropped to a gentle whisper that only he could hear. Cowboy, are you afraid of me or drawn to me? Caleb felt the question settle deep in his chest. He had avoided the answer because he didn't understand what he felt. But now, after everything they had been through, the truth was clear, too clear to ignore. He took a slow breath. I'm not afraid of you, he said quietly. Nayeli held his gaze, searching his eyes. Caleb continued, his voice softer now, almost trembling from honesty. I'm drawn to you, more than I know how to explain. Nayeli's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to say it so openly. Her eyes softened and she took one more small step toward him. They were standing so close that he could feel her warmth mixing with the gentle morning breeze. "You speak the truth now," she whispered. "Your heart finally found its voice." Caleb lowered his eyes shyly. "I'm not good with words." "You don't need to be," she murmured. "You showed me everything through your actions." She lifted her hand slowly and placed it lightly against his chest, right over his heart. Caleb froze. Not out of fear, but because the gesture was so gentle, so full of trust, that it shook him deeply. "You helped my brother," she said. "You stayed with me in the dark, and when I thought I was alone, you stood beside me." Caleb felt something warm build in his throat. He wasn't used to anyone seeing him like this or speaking to him with such sincerity. Nayeli's voice softened even more. "I don't know what the future holds, but if you ever choose to return, if you ever ride by this way again, my door will be open." Caleb looked up slowly, meeting her eyes. In her gaze, he saw something new, something hopeful, gentle, and quietly inviting. He took a single step closer. "I will come back," he said softly. "I don't want this to end here." Nayeli smiled, a warm, quiet smile that reached her eyes. "Then it won't." She placed her forehead lightly against his, a gesture full of respect, calmness, and connection. They stood like that for a long moment, the village waking up around them, the desert glowing with morning light. When Caleb pulled back, she whispered, "Go safely, Caleb Ward." "I will," he said, "and I'll come back soon." He turned toward his horse, but before mounting, he glanced back at her. Nayeli was still standing beneath the tree, watching him with steady eyes. As he rode away, the rising sun painted the desert gold. The wind carried her whisper behind him, soft but unforgettable. "Drawn, not afraid." Caleb smiled to himself. He didn't know what their future would become, but for the first time in years, his heart felt alive, warm, and open. He would return, not because he owed her anything, but because something strong and unspoken now connected them, something born in the quiet desert night, strengthened by trust and sealed with a simple, honest truth. He was drawn to her, and he knew he always would be.